We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. This episode of What in the NDIS Now is brought to you by Astalty. Astalty is the software solution for NDIS professionals built by NDIS professionals. Astalty is my go-to software, and Astalty is trusted and loved by hundreds of other NDIS providers. I love how easy it is to use and how it keeps all my participant information, notes, and invoicing all in one place, available to me anytime from any device. Sign up now for your 14-day free trial. Head to astalty.com.au to sign up now. See for yourself how much easier managing all your NDIS business needs are by using Astalty. Thanks again to Astalty for sponsoring today's episode. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hi Sam, how are you going?
Yeah, really good, thanks, Hannah. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. What have you been up to?
Keeping going in the wonderful world of NDIS and the disability space and everything that's been going on, and just keeping my head above water, which I feel like is a good thing in this current state.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that pretty much sums me up too, actually.
I feel like that sums up all our private phone call conversations over the last quarter. But I'm really excited for today, because today's a topic that we haven't actually had on or touched much around with the podcast.
Yes. So we have Jess on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you. So as we always start the show, where did you grow up?
So I grew up on Yuggera and Eurapul country, Ipswich in Queensland. The Switch. Spent all my life, growing up in Yamanto, which is kind of like near Amberley, RAF base. Think lots of low-lying, loud airplanes. And then high school moved over to Carolee side of things. Yeah, kind of out that way.
Queensland born and bred.
Yeah. I've proud bogan, that's for sure.
I love the proud bogan. My personal favourite term is boutique bogan. It makes me sound a little bit more bougie.
Oh, did you get that from maps? Like Boganic?
No, because a friend of mine who's a drag queen, we got very drunk one day walking along the Redcliffe Boulevard, and we were like, we should start a YouTube show called Boutique Bogan.
And I've heard that Redcliffe too is like Ipswich by the sea.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's very pretty, although the difference is it's more tired.
Okay. Yeah, one big difference.
Except if you cross it, there's a very slight line between Redcliffe and a couple of the other surrounding suburbs, and you know when you've stepped out of those suburbs.
You know when you've gone too far.
Yeah, we swap the geriatrics with other things, but we'll leave that alone.
Yeah, but I pretty much got out of Ipswich as soon as I was old enough to. Lived on the Gold Coast, studied in Brisbane, spent a bit of time in the South Burnett, and then now I am in Sunshine Coast, Gubby Gubby country.
Cool. Awesome. Jess, tell us, how did you get into the disability sector?
Okay, so I only know how to tell a long story. So short story long.
We love long stories, so don't stress.
Okay, well, it all started. No, I started studying social work and going through social work, trying to figure out, I guess, what niche I wanted to be a part of, because it's kind of, when you study social work, you get the broad, this is what the whole sector looks like, and then you kind of get to pick what your niche is. If you want to work with children and child safety, or young people, or disability, aged care, kind of, you get to pick what stream. And I knew that I really wanted to work with young people, and I really wanted to support young people who may not have had the best start to life and transitioning to being adults. So trying to figure out, like, what kind of life skills do you need? What needs to happen to set yourself up for success, and all of those things that, I guess, even for myself, it was like baptism by fire. You had to learn as you went. So wanting to kind of, I knew that I wanted to work with young people, and I knew that I wanted to work around upskilling and supporting people to become young adults, and in a safe environment. So when I graduated, I started working at the Community Living Association in Nunda, which is a beautiful organisation. I worked in the AROS team, working with young people in transition from being in foster care to becoming independent, and who had intellectual disabilities or cognitive impairments. It was the whole spiel. I don't know how I still remember it, some 10 years later.
That's very specific.
It was about as niche as it comes. So it was working with young people who had been through the child safety system. And this is my claim to fame as well. I've been working in the disability sector since it was DSQ days. So was with CLA when the NDIS was being introduced, and seeing how that transition affected things as well. So I guess I got into the disability sector because I wanted to work with young people, and then the young people that I was working with had quite complex trauma, mental health, psychosocial disabilities. And then that has been my whole career. The last 12 years has really been sitting in that space. When I finished up working at Community Living Association, I had moved out to the South Burnett, and I was working at a community controlled health service in Cherbourg. And I guess I've always worked where the gaps exist, so where the gaps for mainstream exist. And that's, I guess, an area of passion for me, is trying to bridge that gap. So working in at Crakes, it was working with the social emotional wellbeing side of things, and seeing the interplay between health, disability, trauma, grief, isolation, kind of everything at play. And then had the bright idea of having a break from social work and decided to try support coordination. It was not a break from social work at all. It's basically just social work without enough funding.
Well, and social work doesn't have much funding either, but yes, absolutely, it's social work.
Yeah, 100%. It's you're that connector, that case manager, that person whose sole responsibility is making that connection and being that conduit between funding someone's lived experience and what service is really going to be beneficial, and at the same time supposed to be capacity building to hand it all over for that participant to be able to take control of independently as well. So it's a whole nother piece of work that isn't just connecting all those dots. And then I moved to the Sunshine Coast from the South Burnett, because that was always the end dream, was Sunshine Coast, for my daughter to start school. So in doing that, was provided the opportunity to bring social work to the Sunshine Coast in the NDIS through Live Big, and have since pivoted, because there's not a lot of people know what social work is in the NDIS and what can happen. And obviously, wanting to share that knowledge and upskill in the sector, but also needing to be busy and do work. So I've pivoted to do positive behaviour support as well, which is all my favourite parts of social work, is that connecting, building rapport, understanding someone in their environment and triggers, and seeing behaviours of concern as from my lens, seeing behaviours of concern as dysregulation, I guess, and as more of, that emotional dysregulation and communication. So being able to bring that trauma-informed knowledge, my kind of years and skill set of working in this space, to then support and then teach and educate and train, which is another passion of mine, is to be able to support teams and train. So it's been a win-win.
That's so awesome. And I love all of that so much. And also I was going to say, can you teach me how to be an adult? Because I'm not sure I know.
It's more like do as I say.
Sorry, Jess, what were you saying?
It's more do as I say, not as I do.
I live by that mantra. I just don't know how to do what I tell my clients to do. And I stand up in front of a lot of my clients and I just walk away after I've said some stuff and I go, it sounds really simple, but like I could apply this to myself and things might be doing.
Only I did this in my life.
But as we know, it's always easier to sort of be telling other people versus living by what we do. So,
which is why I lead with empathy and unconditional positive regard.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm going to adopt that because, I mean, that's what I strive to do, but I haven't had it put so succinctly. So I love that so much. So I want to start with, what is a social worker?
A social worker is basically, so everybody knows what an OT kind of does, right? They come in, do assessments, they have expertise, and they provide advice, training, support. Social work is very similar, but more of the, I guess, mental health side of things. And the more I have to do with OTs now, the more I'm like, we speak the same language, we do the same things. So a social worker, I can only speak for, we all have our own framework. So we all have our own niche, our own experience. I'm very heavily weighted in the psychosocial space. My background is in doing dialectical behavioral therapy facilitation. So that's kind of like, I'm trauma informed and I'm all about mindfulness, regulation and upskilling, I guess, in creating that insight and awareness and providing space for people to learn more about themselves in a really neuro-affirming way as well. So social workers, we're kind of responsible, or people know us to be responsible for getting to know people and being that conduit, connecting people to the broader systems. I often talk about myself as like a translator. So it's translating the knowledge or translating whatever messages you're getting in relation to the NDIS, translating a plan, translating a budget, translating this is kind of what the system requires of you. This is what you're saying you're wanting from the system. This is how we can marry those two conversations up, which I know I talk a lot with my hands and that's not going to translate to the podcast.
Don't worry about it. I talk with my hands too.
I'm realizing now I don't know how to put that into words.
If you hadn't said anything, no one would know otherwise except for us that get to see the video.
Okay, well, we'll just pretend I never said anything. But so we're kind of like, I guess, the connector, the translator, as well as being able to provide therapeutic interventions, advocacy, support. We can write the shit out of some reports that are really strong pieces of work because I specifically, but I'm sure many social workers are really great at articulating and using that translation service to say, these are the key points, especially for the NDIS, right? Like the NDIS focus on risk. They'll listen to risk. They won't necessarily, if you're asking for anything outside of what they've decided your disability accounts for, risk is really the only way to get to that. So being able to highlight risk associated to that primary disability, regardless of that person in their environment, because that, from my experience, is less important from the NDIS. So relating risk to disability, generally speaking, but being able to still capture that person's voice and experience in a way that is empowering and not detrimental, I guess, for someone to pick up and read about themselves, is the kind of finesse skill that social work brings, as well as being able to make do with what we have, because social workers have always been underfunded. We've always been undervalued. Nobody's understood us. You know, we were one of the last line items to get our own specific title in the IDL category. So, yeah, I feel like social workers can connect all of the dots, and in a way that is supposed to be, I guess, the efficient and effective. Which I know is a really general, broad answer, where maybe you were wanting, like, what's my day-to-day?
No, but it does. Sorry, Anna. It does sort of bring into that sort of the next space, and it's really good that you've had that understanding from the support coordination space as well as the social worker space. Because I think myself included and a lot of listeners are going, we understand that from a support coordination space, and some might understand from a specialist support coordination space, which does have the overlap of the requirement of being some social workery background, but not necessarily at the same time. So what would be I know it's probably not an easy answer, but in probably the simplest concepts, what's the key differences between either a support coordination or specialist support coordinator and the social worker?
I guess one of the key differences is if you have a specialist support coordinator, that role is still centralized on supporting and connecting with services and doing, I guess, heavy case management, right, to ensure that the plan is being utilized, the person's being supported. Social work, the key difference is that we've got the ability to use more, I guess, of a therapeutic intervention, or it's not just like, that's not just our lane, if that makes sense as well. So in the NDIS, for myself on the Sunshine Coast, wanting to implement more of, I guess, a program or my niche, I guess, of the area that I'm passionate about, and have it be more of that capacity building element. So we can do case management, we can do crisis, like we're great in a crisis. It's sometimes one of the only things that motivates me is that deadline.
It's never waste a crisis.
But we're also able to really facilitate and create more of, I guess, that community development style network that can be programs, it can be one-on-one, it can be training for parents and carers, it can be so many different things, I guess, based on what. So I can't really explain what social work is in finite terms, because it really depends on the social worker that you're engaging, right? Like, social workers can write functional capacity assessments. We can do assessments and reports if that's what you need to be able to, like, if you're coming to the end of your plan, you've underutilized funds, or you've got a participant who chronically disengages, like you're sending out the referrals, they're cancelling appointments. My pitch is that social work is able to kind of be that first step to say, well, what are the barriers to engagement? How do we work around these barriers? And then be that conduit to the other referrals that need to happen. It's happened just recently. I spent almost a year working with this one man who was very resistant to the idea of using support and not wanting to engage in services, but engaging with me and doing some of that capacity building, that distress tolerance, emotional regulation, providing empathy in that space, that, like, this is a difficult situation, and supporting through those stages of change for him to get to a point where he could be open and receptive to other referrals, to now be like, all right, go, support coordinator, this is what we need. Like, he's not necessarily got the confidence or the skills to engage with all of these different services, but he'll engage with me and trust that I will be putting forward his voice, I guess, which support coordination, you'd not necessarily got the funding to be able to do that really in time-intensive stuff. And with the turnover of support coordinators as well, like he's been through 4 different support coordinators in the time that I've worked with him. So it's really he and I on this journey together. But then also like wanting to do, back when I worked in the South Burnett, I started this program called the 21st Century Sex Ed Project for young women. It was for all young women 12 and up who wanted to learn more about like menstrual cycle, their own experience of sex, their own experience of pleasure, their own experience of consent, healthy relationships, all like opening up these conversations. And the bulk of my referrals came from schools and from the special ed unit of kind of wanting to make sure that these young women who had cognitive impairments were getting support. And every single one who came to see me had some form of sexual assault, had some experience that they hadn't articulated to anyone until they'd had seen me when I'm opening up this dialogue. So really, and we know that young women in the disability sector are the most at risk for exploitation and abuse. So that has been really what I have wanted to take the social work for me down on the Sunshine Coast, is to do some of that capacity building work that schools think that the parents are doing it, parents think that the schools are doing it, and realistically that those conversations aren't happening in a way that's meaningful and supportive for young women in this area. So, or generally, but given that we're talking about the NDIS, I will focus on that. So yeah, social work is a lot of things. For me, it's advocacy, it's a lot of psychosocial, that complexity where there's it's not just about disability, but it's those environmental factors as well. Like there might be homelessness, isolation, there might be substance misuse, there might be all these other barriers to engagement that exist where I guess, yeah, social work is more familiar with, of being that model that is more outreach based, more taking more responsibility, I guess, for removing those barriers for engagement. It's not just, here's your appointment, oh, you can't attend, 3 cancellations, you're out. It's more awareness of what trauma-informed care looks like and what empowerment and choice and control can look like in a complex area, I guess.
There are so many things that I would love to talk about everything you just said, and it's so exciting to hear about. I think that you are right about and obviously because you've been doing this, but the problem of sex ed and that parents and school kind of divide, and that particularly where puberty is concerned, because when your body is changing in unexpected ways, it can be really scary if you've got neurodiversity or some sort of cognitive impairment happening at the same time, because you're like, what the hell is going on? And I know this a lot from watching my daughter, and, like she freaks out when she has a cold because suddenly her body is doing something wacky. So puberty was gnarly.
Yeah.
And really tough to kind of explain. And I think that this is it's something that is kind of misunderstood about. People just think, oh, well, puberty will just happen. Like, what do we need to explain?
Yeah. So much.
All of us had such a great time going through puberty. Like, it just makes logical sense.
Yeah. No.
So I love that so much. And also talking about sex, because what we know is that not talking about sex doesn't stop sex.
Nope.
And in fact, what it leads to is unsafe sex and all these other things, because no one ever said, by the way, here are some ways to keep safe. And also, if you feel uncomfortable, if you have that uncomfortable feeling in your tummy sort of thing, trust it.
Yeah.
Go kick this person if you have,
Yeah.
sort of thing. So, yeah, I really, I get excited talking about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 35 and I'm still learning to trust it, and I'm still trying to figure out my freaking cycle. Like, it changes, and there's so much executive functioning that needs to happen to be able to remember when you're going to start bleeding, remember that you need to have all of these things, or figure out what works for you out of all of the options out there. Have someone to talk about these things with. I remember the first time, this is probably TMI, feel free to leave it out. But I used to play roller derby, and my roller derby team, it was like one of the girls was the first one to get a menstrual cup, and she was on the group chat of like, has anybody tried to figure this thing out? There's blood everywhere and I don't know what I'm doing. And then it was like we were all the next day, or like our next cycle, being like, all right, we need to go try these menstrual cups and see what it's about, and being able to talk about it in a way that is without shame and is a bit funny, and makes us all feel, I guess, comfortable and okay about trying, and sharing what works and what really didn't work. And even just talking about how the different phases of your cycle affects like your sensitivity, or what you may or may not feel like doing, what you may or may not agree to when you're like ovulating opposed to when you're about to start bleeding, is like, you can't trust. I still have conversations with my sister almost every month where I call her up and I'm like, I'm about to make some big life choices. And she's like, no, give it a week. So it's like all of this stuff where it's like, if nobody's having that conversation, or if nobody's normalizing this stuff, or being that point of contact to make it okay to ask these, silly sometimes questions that aren't silly at all. That's a really big passion area for mine. And then the consent, and being able to talk about sex, and being able to talk about female pleasure as well, which gets left out of the conversation completely. And I think is a big part of the consent conversation as well. Yeah, being able to listen to that gut instinct of, this doesn't feel good and I don't want it to keep going. Or this does feel good and I do want it to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, being able to talk about those things and use that voice, I think it's not something that comes naturally, I don't think, to many people. So yeah.
No.
Would love to do some more of that work.
Yeah.
Jessica Pitt for Education Minister.
Well, this is the thing, right? I didn't realize. I thought that sex ed still happened in schools, but when I spoke to the school about it, they like, we can't test on it, so we don't teach it, because there's no, like, the curriculum doesn't lead to an exam, so then it gets like left out.
I feel like there should be an exam, and I feel like if I go any further, we're getting to like breaching the swearing realms. But I'm pretty sure like there's lots of like females out there that go, I really wish there were some people that had like a diagram and had to draw circles to confirm whether they know things.
Yeah. Yes. And for me, like,
I feel like
well,
I would fail that exam though.
Yeah. Is it a multiple guess, or
can I choose which exam paper I get?
So even for myself, it's not just about like sexuality, or talking about consent and talking about menstrual health and talking about what all of this means, but then also talking about sexuality, talking about gender. I came out very late in life, literally last year. And it's all because like that compet got me good, I guess all the signs are there, but when you don't have anyone to talk about it with, or you don't have anyone to flesh it out with, mixed up with all of this other stuff of like what's expected, how things work, and then adding, I guess, the added layer of having a disability and often like the infantilizing that comes with, you know, having a disability. So wanting to really be able to bridge that gap and be that person that is like, this is something that should be talked about, can be talked about, and is an ongoing conversation. You don't have it once and that's it. There's so many touch points along the way.
I think that raises some good context around last year's yes/no list with sexual supports essentially being, no, we can't do that. But as the arguments have been, there's like strong cases for people to be able to essentially relieve themselves to minimize ongoing behavioral problems.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts with the NDIS kind of cracking down and for lack of, government having a tanty around it?
Yeah, this is such a tricky question because I kind of see both sides where it's controversial and
it's a tough sell to the general public, right?
it's a really tough sell, but I can also see how it's like a genuine need and it's a genuine like that connection and that intimacy and that relationship. Like I can see also how that is absolutely a need and I guess where I sit probably currently is how I sit with most things. If the NDIS is there to, I guess, remove barriers relating to disability, but it's not necessarily there to pay for everything. Do you know what I mean? Like remove barriers to going to the movies, but won't pay for the movie. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I guess I don't know. And I flim-flam constantly. I can always see both sides.
I have that
also think that if it was like a genuine service that was offered as disability informed, it would look completely different. But because it's like a square peg in a round hole currently, no pun intended, it can be more unsafe than what it would be if it was just like, yeah, this is happening and we need to make it safe.
Well, it probably does come down to the root sort of starting point of this conversation is that educational and understanding ground, like from adolescence up and the maturity levels, because I feel like if we've looked at recent news articles and press releases and that sort of thing, our government doesn't really know how to be mature either half the time.
It's a confused system. And I don't know, I guess in a perfect world, right, it would be that everyone would be disability informed, like everybody would be trauma informed, like mainstream would not be so drastically removed from what is supportive for people with disabilities in all areas. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, that feels like a PC kind of answer.
Releasing frameworks for the next pathway for the disability world.
Sorry,
what a perfect world that would be.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, that'd be if I had my way.
Which segues nicely into our final question. In your ideal world, what would the future of the NDIS look like?
I think some consistency and reliability and just some breathing space. I feel like we've just been through change after change after change after change. Every year, everyone is kind of having to prove their disability and spends a lot of time and energy in kind of confirming that the disability still exists, and this is how it's affecting me, and this is what it looks like. And so much money is being spent on keeping people where they are, not in all cases, but just some breathing space to allow for that real quality of life work. Yeah, and for the PACE model to get rolled in seamlessly and for it to have no adverse effects, that would be amazing. But that consistency and reliability and breathing space where it's quality of life is that real focus, which it is essentially now in theory, and it's definitely part of everybody's work. But I don't know that it's the focus of everybody's work. Still think it's deficit is the focus, unfortunately. So in a perfect world, it's messy, I guess. I don't know how that looks in real life.
I love that. I think that's a really nice, in-depth and like thought-provoking answer we've had to that question.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
I love the idea of it being around quality of life rather than just keeping you alive and keeping people in that sort of survival mode, which doesn't help anybody thrive, because survival mode has such a detrimental effect on, everything in the body, but particularly your brain and your mental health. And the ability to shift into quality of life, let's have a quality of life rather than just keep you surviving, would be huge.
Yeah, and I understand that already is part of the NDIS framework, but it's just, it feels more vulnerable, even as myself as a practitioner, to be swayed in that direction. So even with PBS, for example, positive behavior support, we talk about behaviors of concern, and then, or we can do a quality of life skill development kind of plan. And for the first time, I'm writing these quality of life skill development because we've worked through behaviors of concern. We've mitigated all of those. Everything's honky-dory. Do you know what I mean? But now I'm writing this report going, oh, things don't seem bad enough. Like, are the people going to think I'm doing a good job? Is it going to get refunded? Do I need it to be refunded? What's going to happen for long term for this? Like, it just brings up so much more, like, I'm not doing my job well enough because things are going well,
Right.
which is
I think that in itself, Hannah, I think we're going to add to another production topic. Detrimental between adverse negative report writing versus actual realistic positive growth sort of report writing.
Yeah.
In the line. I also feel like we might have just come up with a DSC training idea.
Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, no, I know my stuff. I'm confident in writing this, but at the same time, I'm like, someone's going to read this and think like, yeah, this person doesn't need support, or this person doesn't need, like, that's my worry, is that someone's going to read it, take it out of context, and then this person's funding is going to get cut. It's like, no, to have this continue, the funding needs to be there.
And it's going to be very subtext as well, or like, because I was looking at an OT report for a client recently, or for a client's client, and there was a specific line that I just skimmed through the OT report. I found that one thing, what that recommendation was, and just the way they had worded it kind of obfuscated the rest of the context of the document, to that if I was a planner with, as we know, because the CEO has come out and said they don't spend much time on it, I'd be looking for that one line and I would see that, I'd get confused and I'd take the negative idea out of that. And then it causes more work in the long run for both the support coordinator and more pain for the participant to try and have to argue that, because, as you said, it's we might know what the intent of the report was if we read it out in the whole document, but that's not the reality of how it works at the end of the day.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, I want to work myself out of a job, but it's like, I don't want to work myself out of a job before the job is done.
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. I did want to, you just reminded me that I did want to ask you about roller derby.
Oh, yeah.
And so what was your nickname, if you want to share?
I played for Northern Brisbane Rollers and I was Jagged Edge.
Nice.
Jagged Edge.
Yeah.
So can you quickly explain to people in a nutshell what roller derby is? Because not everyone will have heard of it.
Honestly, it's the best sport ever. It's incredible. It is, for me, changed my life joining this roller derby team. I grew up, I went to all-girls school. All the kind of negative, like, messaging that you get about, like, we're all a bunch of bitches and we hate each other, drama, come to roller derby, which is like a all-female, full-contact sport. So essentially, you wear roller skates, you skate around in circles, and the point is to just knock the other team out of the way so that one of your players can get points for as many people you pass. It's hard to explain. I don't know how to explain it without using hand gestures, and I don't know how to explain my hand gestures in a way that works. An audio medium. So, yeah, essentially there's like 5 players on the track each time, 4 blockers per team, and 1 jammer per team, and the jammer is the one that scores the points. So the blockers really just want to stop the jammer from getting points, but also support their own to get through. So yeah, it's a full contact sport on skates, and it's amazing, and it's the most empowering, uplifting, supportive game I've ever played. It made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't do, and I'm still close friends with the team, the Dynamite Dolls from back in the day. We're all kind of spread out across Queensland now, but we try and catch up at least once a year, and it's been like 15 years. And even to, there was single mums in the group. There was different, just people expressing themselves in such individualized ways that was kind of really opened my eyes to what was possible. But yeah, it's the best.
Out of curiosity, though, how real world compared to movie Whip It?
Well, there's so many more rules. I mean, I was like a baby giraffe on skates when I first started because I'm quite tall and lanky, and I was a jammer, and I would get knocked and I would just go flying, like arms and legs everywhere. But the bruises and everything that you get is like badges of honor. It's amazing to have like rink rash and gina shiners, and it was cool. But there's a lot more rules, but the contact is real and the pain is real.
That just doesn't sound fun to me.
No, honestly, it's the best. It's the best. And the after parties were always hilarious. And when I played, it was kind of like there was still, back in my day, they still played at the convention centre. So it was like we had, we wore fishnets and we'd like dress up and do makeup. But then it was like a full contact, like actual sport, not a performance. It wasn't choreographed. But now I think it's gone a bit more like serious.
Oh. Gone are the back in my day days where we could just go run rampant. The PC world and the nanny state have gone a little bit more reckless.
Yeah, well, I think it went to, they wanted, because it was a female sport, wanting it to be more taken seriously and legitimized. So it's like, let's wear real uniforms and be a real sport. But there was always like the divisions of like, you'll never take my fishnets off me.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah, I'd get back into it, but I'm so old. And now, like, I've got a daughter. It'd be great for her to see me play, but if I broke something, it'd just be a disaster.
Look, I feel that there was a point late last year where I was going ice skating, and I ended up on the ice several times. And I used to do figure skating when I was, here's some history for everyone. I used to do figure skating when I was a wee little tiger. Not as tall as I was and a lot more rounder. So it was a lot easier to fall back then. Had some more insulation as well. It wasn't as cold. And then I go in and I'm going, I get down to 20 degrees and I'm like, where's my jumper and trackies?
Yeah.
And then I'm standing up and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling old. But on the note of, before we get down and spilling any more of the beans of our degrading youth, I think that's a good point to wrap up.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jess, for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, it has been my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Been a great chat. Thanks very much. And always, huzzah!
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.